Welcome into Locked On Phillies. I'm officially hitting the panic button on this 2022 Phillies team, and I'll break it down into three specific facets of the Phillies organization on today's Locked On Phillies.
You are Locked On Phillies, your daily Philadelphia Phillies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome into Locked On Phillies. I'm your host, Connor Thomas. Been talking Phillies baseball for years over on 97.5 The Fanatic on Sports Talk Radio. Happy to be here as your host of Locked On Phillies. I want to thank you for making Locked On Phillies your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And today's episode is brought to you by Bet Online. Bet Online has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. Bet Online, it's where the game starts. This is the first one of these shows this year. It may not be the last one, but today we are not recapping any games. We are not talking about anything that happened over the weekend yet. I will do all of that in tomorrow's episode, but I'm hitting the panic button on the Philadelphia Phillies. I've officially pressed the panic button. I've been, I feel like, a little bit more reserved with my worries about this team than the average fan has been. Maybe I've been too easy on them so far, but after what I saw this weekend, Memorial Day weekend, against the New York Mets, it's time. I've got to go ahead and press the panic button because this team is in absolute trouble. We're going to break it down three different ways. The three facets that we're going to look at, we're going to start by looking at the manager. Then we're going to look at the team as a whole, the players themselves. And then finally, we're going to look at the entirety of the organization. And I'm going to break down why in each of those different sectors of what we're talking about with the Phillies, I've pressed the panic button. There's reasons in all three of them for me to have hit this button and for this team to be where they're at. So let's start off with Joe Girardi, the manager for the time being of the Philadelphia Phillies. You guys have heard me talk about him. You know how I feel about Joe Girardi and what's going on right now as far as his ability to manage this team. I don't think he manages the bullpen well, which is the bullpen's an issue that we're going to get into in each of these different sectors because when a unit is this bad for this long, it's the player's fault, it's the manager's fault, it's the organization's fault. It's everybody. Everyone has a hand in it. But Joe Girardi is not doing these guys any favors by the positions he's putting them in. Like Corey Knebel this weekend, he gives up the go-ahead home run to the New York Mets, or rather the tying home run after Nick Castellanos hit the go-ahead home run for the Phillies, to New York Mets, to some plumber. Oh, no, his name's Plumber? He might as well be a plumber. It was his first Major League hit and Major League home run. It leads to the Phillies losing that game to the Mets. Then Knebel comes in the next game against against the San Francisco Giants and does basically the same thing, gives up a big home run late. Like, you have to have a feel for when your pitchers are on and when they need a day off, even though it's a situation. And I know it's on Knebel for giving up the home runs. We'll talk about that when we talk about the players. But Girardi's mismanagement of the closer position, his mismanagement of the bullpen in general, throwing out Andrew Bellotti out there when the dude just doesn't look like a major league pitcher is crazy. And I don't understand the pitch selection, which ultimately falls down onto the manager, because if you don't trust whoever the catcher is, whether it's JT Realmuto or Garrett Stubbs, if you don't trust them to make those calls, then it falls on you to take over responsibility to call. And Joe Girardi was a catcher at the major league level, a good one. That falls on him. Pitch selection ultimately falls to him as the manager of this team. So that's issue number one with Joe Girardi. The management of the bullpen's been awful. Guys' availability, which is a decision I have to believe he's making. If not, we'll talk about it in the organization part of this conversation we're having in today's episode. But it's got to be his call on when these guys are up and when these guys are down, and the seemingly babying, like kid gloves use of these players. Now, Sir Anthony Dominguez, I understand he's come off of a serious injury that cost him a year plus of baseball. I get that you want to be cautious with him. But man, he seems like he's really been underutilized on this team. Corey Knebel, it feels like they're handling with kid gloves with the amount of days he's available in a row. Like, if he goes 2 days in a row, I get it. You want to get him rest on the third day. But if you get in a situation like they got in Atlanta, where they went with Nick Nelson instead of Corey Knebel, and it ended up costing them the game, you got to have exceptions for that. You have to know what guys to go with in which situations, when to throw Jose Alvarado and when not to. Like, it's been too many years of, oh, well, what can this guy do with the bullpen? Every button he presses seems like it's wrong because the players aren't executing. Yeah, that's partially right. But part of it is the manager's got to figure something out. Something's got to work, and he can't find the solution there. The lineup has been all over the place. He's switched lineups probably 100 times already. They haven't even played 100 games. It's nuts how often the players are batting in different spots in the lineup in a different order, playing different positions. And some of it is necessity. Others is just too much tinkering. We talked about it a couple weeks ago, or maybe just a little bit over a week ago. I wanted Joe Girardi to just leave the darn lineup alone, set these guys in a spot, and let them hit their way out. He just refuses to do it. He continues to tinker and change and switch guys up and down the lineup. And I get what he's trying to do, but it's not working. And he's not taking a different approach. The lineup has been an issue, and the leadoff hitter spot has been an issue, and that's something we'll talk about with the players. But it also goes to Girardi to just set it and forget it and let these guys hit their way out instead of no one knows where they're hitting any given day, and it leads to inconsistency, which leads to lower performance, in my opinion. The defense is not on him. We knew this coming in, that the team was not going to be good defensively. We'll talk about that in the players setup. But the switching arounds of positions played and stuff like that, it's not helpful. There's just too much tinkering, and none of it is working. And Joe Girardi just seems to be changing things for the sake of changing things. Well, it's not working. And now I think the organization needs to change things for the sake of changing things. And it starts with moving on from Joe Girardi as the manager of this team. Now, who do you bring in to replace? I've talked about this in an episode before. I don't know. I don't know who the right answer is. I don't know who the best fit is. But the issue, and that's the thing that a lot of people bring up, well, what has Joe Girardi done to hurt this team? Or what has he done to deserve to be fired? And what do you bring in that will be better than that? One, a manager shouldn't be a net neutral, especially a manager for a team this good. They should be a net positive. Those guys exist out there. That is what the Philadelphia Phillies are worthy of. We should not accept, oh, what has Joe Girardi done wrong? Because there have been things that he's mismanaged, but you need to see him do things right. You need positive impact, not just no impact. And who do you bring in to replace? Well, anyone, because you need to just change the momentum of this team. Sometimes when you get a new voice in there, where you just move on from a manager, it's a wake-up call more so to the players that, hey, there's no scapegoat anymore. I'm next. I'm getting moved on from next. I'm getting sent down next. They moved on from the manager. This new guy comes in, new life. Maybe it's Dusty Watson, a guy that the guys seem to like, that they'll fight for. Maybe it's a minor league guy. Maybe it's a retread hire that's out there available. I don't know what the answer is. All I know is that a change needs to be made because what's going on isn't working currently. Could it be worse? Like, what's going to happen? What is your fear? That they're going to bring in another manager and they're going to start losing games? They're already losing games. I'm done with Joe Girardi here in his time in Philadelphia. It was an unfortunate time. He's underachieved with the rosters that he's had. He's underachieved so far this season. And it's time to cut bait before it gets too bad. Well, I've already hit the panic button, so clearly it's getting too bad. But it is time to cut bait on Joe Girardi, and that's how I feel about the manager's position. That's where the manager factors into all of this. But the players factor in as well. And coming up next, I'm going to break down exactly what the issues are player-wise with this team so far that has caused me to hit the panic button and tell you, well, if there's any solution on this roster or in that clubhouse to remedy this as the Phillies continue on with their season. Now, our next partner has a product that I use literally every day. I started taking Athletic Greens, the AG1 formula that they have, because I don't eat very healthy. I'm a mid-20s guy who lives on my own. Like, I eat a lot of stuff out of the microwave. It's no good. I need to get my nutrients somehow. So I went ahead and I tried Athletic Greens because of their 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens. All those big words, what that means? Well, breaks down to one small word. Health. It's healthy for you. They've done the work already. Like, I'm not an expert in this stuff. I don't know how to get the right adaptogens or probiotics or what any of that really means. All I know is that it's good for you. And AG1, the people at Athletic Greens, have done the work for you. They know it's healthy. They know it works. It gives me energy every day. Man, let me tell you why I started taking them. Because I wake up at 4 a.m. in the morning for my morning radio shift. I'm there from like 4 to 11, and I come here and I record the podcast normally around noon. I got to go to the bank to watch the Phillies probably lose another game. I do all of that, and I got to have the energy by eating well and getting the nutrients. Well, I don't eat that well, so I got to get the nutrients through Athletic Greens. It's so good. There's such great stuff in there, and they're going to cut you a great deal to make it easy for you to get started. To make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/MLB Network. Again, that's athleticgreens.com/MLB Network. And you can take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. Okay, we're on to the players and what role they hold in this. And a lot of people feel that the players hold the biggest role in the team's underachieving so far this year, we'll call it. And it's hard to disagree. The players, ultimately, they play the game. They have the biggest impact on the game, more so than management, more so than ownership, more so than the manager of the team. I already said management. I don't know. Everyone's got fault. I can list any category or department of the Philadelphia Phillies organization, and they're partially at fault. But the players, a lot of people feel, hold the most blame. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about why the Phillies are where they are and if they have any way to remedy it. Well, the bullpen, apparently they stink again. I don't know. You bring in guys like Juris Familia and Brad Hand, who are veteran guys who you expect not to be great, but to be able to at least get outs relatively consistently. Brad Hand hasn't been bad, but Juris Familia has not been good. Corey Knebel, after an outstanding start to the year as the new closer, now can't seem to close the game if his life depended on it. You got guys like Andrew Bellotti and Nick Nelson, who just they're not like minor league guys, but they're not part of a winning major league bullpen. Jose Alvarado's hugely fallen off. Connor Brogdon hasn't really had all that great of a year. Like, I don't know what basically you looked at this Philadelphia Phillies bullpen coming in and you're like, well, there's no way they can all underachieve. Well, they have. So the entirety of the bullpen is underachieved, basically top to bottom, maybe outside of Brad Hand, who hasn't been like exceptional. He's just been good for what you signed him for. That's unacceptable. And that causes you to lose games. And it's been a problem for the Phillies for years. And that'll fall as we get into the organization part of the conversation in the final segment. That'll fall under that umbrella, but it's still on these players to not all underachieve. And they all are right now. Let's look at the defense. Okay. Yeah. You're not supposed to be a great defensive team, but Nick Castellanos and Kyle Schwarber have been net negatives in the outfield. Alec Boehm has gotten better at third, but he's still not an absolute lock. Bryson Stott hasn't been as good defensively as you would like him to be, but he's young. Center field, actually not terrible defensively. Mickey Moniak had a nice catch yesterday. Roman Quinn, defensively, he's not a liability. He's probably below major league average, or I'd be willing to list him as an average defender. The issue is with the outfield. The outfield's a more cohesive unit than anything else, and we've seen lately as the Phillies have gone on this slide, balls in between two outfielders have been an issue, and that's simple communication. I play in a Sunday softball league. We don't run into each other. These guys are major league ball players. It's just talking and communicating with each other. Part of that goes back to the Joe Girardi inconsistencies of guys are constantly playing different spots and you don't develop that rapport. Part of it, though, is be a major league outfielder. And that doesn't necessarily mean, like when Roman Quinn makes an error in Atlanta that allows the Braves to get the winning run on second base. Well, yeah, that's on Roman Quinn. But the communication between the outfield seemed like it got caught kind of in between him and I believe Nick Castellanos was playing right field in that game. That's unacceptable for both players' parts. And it almost feels like the right field and left field corner spots are so bad defensively that it's bleeding over to center field because the communication lacks. The infield hasn't been awful defensively, but they haven't been great offensively. Like, you look at some of the batters in the infield. Rhys Hoskins isn't really giving you all that much. Give you a little bit of pop once in a while. JT Realmuto's underachieved. Kyle Schwarber is out there, but we'll count him as an infielder because he does play a little bit of first base sometimes. I'm using a caveat. We're just going to go offense here, though. Kyle Schwarber is largely underachieved for what you signed him for. Nick Castellanos, relatively consistent. The power numbers aren't what you'd want it to be, but you could attribute that to just them being down across baseball. But just him being average is not enough. And this is kind of the average mark that you'd expect from Nick Castellanos. You need him to overachieve when the rest of the team is struggling, and he hasn't really done that so far. And I can't throw much fault on him, but I can throw some because you need players that you pay that much money to step up in these spots. Bryce Harper certainly stepped up. Bryce Harper's incredible. He might be the only player on this team that I have no issues with so far. But you look across the lineup, and a lot of these guys have largely underachieved. That falls on them. The starting rotation, you know what? It's actually been a strong point of this year. If there's, outside of Bryce Harper, a part of this team that I feel has the least blame on them, it's the starting rotation. Aaron Nola has had strong starts. He needs to be more consistent, but he gives you something every time out where you have a chance to win a ball game. Zach Wheeler has been great. Zach Wheeler gives you a chance every time out to win a ball game. Kyle Gibson has been relatively good. Another guy, like, inconsistent, but his peak has been good. Like, his top level has been better than average in Major League Baseball. And Ranger Suarez has had his moments, as well as Zach Eflin. Now, Ranger Suarez taking a step back from last year, obviously. Still struggling at points. He needs to be better, but he hasn't been abysmal. Zach Eflin had moments, has not been abysmal, needs to be better, but they're probably about, Ranger Suarez is probably about where I thought he was going to be this year with a step back from last year. Zach Eflin probably about what I thought he was going to be this year so far. Zach Wheeler, better than expected this early. I expected at some point he would get to this level of success pitching, but better than expected. Aaron Nola, about as expected. Kyle Gibson, better than expected. That's a unit that's overachieved. Simple as that. So they're probably the least blamed, but when you turn it over to that Phillies bullpen and they blow a lead for you just basically day in and day out, doesn't matter how good your starting pitching is. So that's my issues with the players. Now, all of that comes back, though, to the organization, and it feeds up almost. It starts with the manager, it carries over to the players, and feeds up to the organization. So we're going in pretty solid order as far as the hierarchy of the team. Even though Joe Girardi is technically in charge of the players, it feels like he is more the base of the fault there. But we'll talk about the organization and why the Phillies are in the spot to begin with in our final segment on today's show. But I also want to tell you about our Locked On Nows. I want to thank you, as always, for making Locked On Phillies your first listen every day. I also want you to check out our Locked On Nows, though, as I give you an immediate reaction to just a fun and exciting Philadelphia Phillies season. Well, obviously that's sarcasm, but there's some great teams out there across Major League Baseball, some compelling storylines, some interesting players that got call-ups or are on MVP-type campaigns early in the season. And nows are your immediate reactions from our hosts across Major League Baseball to breaking news, wins, losses, everything that happens to keep you updated. And you can find it in podcast form wherever you get your podcast by just checking out Locked On Nows. Definitely worth taking a peek at that. Coming up, talk about the organization and why I feel that they're the base reason for all of these problems. The issue is you can't fire an owner, and they're not firing the GM. So let's talk about what a solution could possibly be next. All right, organization time. Let's start from the top. John Middleton, we're going back to his comments about spending stupid money, because he did say that, and he's been true to his word. They've spent money. They paid Bryce Harper. They paid Zach Wheeler. They paid JT Realmuto. They paid Nick Castellanos. They paid Kyle Schwarber. They've thrown money at these guys. Why is the money not working? Well, it's because you're paying the wrong guys. Well, largely, I don't even want to say largely, actually. It's 50-50. They're paying the wrong guys as opposed to paying the right guys. And I don't know if that falls more on Dave Dombrowski. I don't know if it's left over from Matt Klentak and there's too much to overcome. Let's start with Matt Klentak, who's no longer here, because the fault heaped on him absolves this current regime's fault a little bit. I can't be faulting Dave Dombrowski, Sam Fuld, and John Middleton for what happened for Matt Klentak's decision. John Middleton, I can a little bit because he hired him, but whatever. He fired him and they moved on. It is Dave Dombrowski and Sam Fuld and John Middleton's decisions to bring in Nick Castellanos and Kyle Schwarber and give money to Zach Wheeler and pay JT Realmuto and do all that. And you know what? I'm even going to give John Middleton the credit for Bryce Harper because anyone could throw money at one of the best players in baseball. And we're just lucky that he came here and signed here. I'm not giving credit to Matt Klentak for the Bryce Harper move. Not at all. Let's look at Dave Dombrowski, though. He hasn't really had time to do enough to the bullpen because he's trying to fill a myriad of holes. From where this team was to where this team needed to be, there was a big gap. And normally what you do is you would supplement the farm system as a new GM or president of baseball operations, as Dombrowski actually is listed as, Sam Fuld, of course, the GM of this team. You'd have to fill those gaps. So let's say you'd have let's look at the Baltimore Orioles. It's Steven Means, a good starting pitcher. Threw a no-hitter last year. Good option there. You have Adley Rutschman, the top recruit in baseball, the top prospect in baseball. You have the number 3 prospect in baseball and a pitcher whose name is escaping me. I don't know the Orioles inside now. But when you look at that team, when you come in, you're like, okay, I'm set at catcher. I've got an ace coming up, we hope. We have a little bit of groundwork for those prospects where I have the number 1 and number 3 prospects in all baseball coming into this season. I can work with that, fill out the roster. I don't have to go all in for now because I can get some young players that may be undervalued or I may be able to underpay a little bit to bring in to supplement some great players and they can grow into their own. Nice. That's how building an organization is supposed to work. What the Phillies did is they realized we have no farm system. We have no way to rebuild it immediately. And while Dave Dombrowski's trying, looking at a couple arms, you see Mick Abel and Andrew Painter, the 2 first-round picks they've made in back-to-back years, both prep righty guys that are going to take a while to develop into major league players, but are having strong minor league careers so far. Nice. It seems like Dave Dombrowski knows what he's doing. Sam Fuld knows what he's doing. They've drafted well since he's been here. But those guys might not see till 2024, 2025. Who knows when they'll get up to the major leagues? There was nothing in the farm system when Dombrowski took over this team, which meant he has to do a patchwork. He has to convince John Middleton to spend money on certain guys that you'll have to pay and outbid teams for to bring in to beat other teams. Well, what that means is you got to throw money at certain guys, and you can only do so much in so many offseasons. Like you can't sign 5 or 6 guys to $300 million contracts in an offseason. Now, they did Bryce Harper. They signed JT and Zach Wheeler last offseason or last midseason, really. Wheeler got his contract in the offseason. JT obviously got his in the season while they were going in that best catcher in baseball campaign that was going on. And then this past offseason, obviously, Kyle Schwarber and Nick Castellanos get the bag. But you can only do one or two of those guys in offseason. And what's been the neglected part? Well, the bullpen. And can I blame Dave Dombrowski for neglecting the bullpen? Not really. Like you can't. There's only so much money to be spent. I know there's no salary cap, but there's a luxury tax. They would have had to go higher into the luxury tax to a higher tier if they were to sign anyone else worth any type of money after signing Castellanos and Schwarber this offseason. There's only so much Dave Dombrowski can do, and it would really help him if we had a farm system. It really goes back to Matt Klentak, and we're still seeing the after effects of that. Now, was it stupid on the organization's part to allow Matt Klentak to ruin this franchise? Yes, and that falls on John Middleton for a bad hire. That's what it ultimately comes back to. I can't absolve Dave Dombrowski of all fault because he did bring in Juris Familia. He did decide that Hector Neris was going to be moving on from the team and not to bring him back in favor of Corey Knebel. Those are his moves, and they're not working out. But the emphasis hasn't been put on the bullpen. It's been put on the stars and the offense, which is normally how you win, and it just hasn't worked out. But it's not a fair ask to want Dave Dombrowski to do more than what he already has. I don't feel that that's fair given what he came into. And it reverts back to Matt Klentak. But that's the problem with the Phillies organization. They've gone too long without a farm system. They've gone all in on this generation by signing older players, not like ancient, but Nick Castellanos, Kyle Schwarber, Bryce Harper, JT Realmuto, Zach Wheeler. These are not young players. These are guys in their primes or on the back end of their primes who are not going to have more than like 2-3 more good seasons to go and chase a championship. And then when you're done that, what do you have? There's no consistent building with this organization because they got so behind the eight ball from 2010 to 2020. And now they're trying to fight their way out by also competing, and it's not working. It's a dangerous combination, one that could lead to more years of not tanking, but not competing, maybe selling off guys if this doesn't go well. You have basically 2 years for this to work, this year, next year, and then you got to start considering selling on Kyle Schwarber, selling on Nick Castellanos, selling on JT Realmuto, selling on Zach Wheeler, moving these guys to try and build a farm system so that you can compete further down the line, and that takes you out of Bryce Harper's prime. It's not a good time frame situation for the Phillies, not a good players situation with the Phillies. Obviously, players underachieving right now across the board, a lot of them, and not a great managerial situation for the Phillies. Now, the manager is the easiest to fix. That's why Joe Girardi is the first move I would make, is moving on from him. But that's all why I've hit the panic button. It's hard times right now in the neighborhood for the Phillies, and all they can do is go out and try and win a ball game the next day. That's literally all they can do. Go out tonight and try and take one from the San Francisco Giants, and we'll see what they can do. But, man, the schedule gets easier. That's about the only silver lining I'm seeing. And we just have to hang on for the ride and hope the Phillies come back and give us something worthwhile this summer. Because right now, panic button is hit. This organization's in trouble. And I'm officially worried about the direction, not just this year for the franchise, but for this franchise in the coming seasons. That's what I've got for you for today's Locked On Phillies. I want to thank you again for making Locked On Phillies your first listen every day. Now make your second listen Locked On MLB. Paul Francis Sully. He's great. He knows baseball inside and out. He's an encyclopedia of knowledge, and he's got great stories about the game, does a bunch of great crossovers with our other hosts. It's available wherever you get your podcasts. So check out Sully on Locked On MLB. Now, I know normally this episode of the week is when we do Off the Poll. We're pushing that to tomorrow. We'll be back to our normal episodes tomorrow, and I'll give you a recap of everything that went on in the Giants game, a recap of the weekend. We'll break down the actual X's and O's of it, and we'll do all that. But we just needed the panic button episode because that's where I am at this point. And hopefully the Phils can pull out of it. But right now, times look bleak for the Philadelphia Phillies. You never know, though. Things could always turn around. And I will tell you more about that on tomorrow's Locked On Phillies. Thanks for listening.